Welcome to It's Not What You Think, episode 22, recorded on August 5th, 2021. Kathleen Quinn is the president of Iyengar Yoga Association of Southern California. She's also the owner-director of San Marcos Yoga in Southern California as well. Kathleen took her first formal yoga class more than 30 years ago and has been teaching the last 20 years. During that time, she's had the privilege of studying with Mr. Iyengar in person, as well as with numerous other senior students of his. And finally, in my opinion, having studied with many great teachers in my life, Kathleen is absolutely one of the most qualified and caring yoga instructors I've ever had the pleasure of studying with. Not all yoga is created equal, and not all yoga teachers are created equal. Hope you enjoy the podcast. It's Not What You Think is available on YouTube and Spotify, so please like, comment, share, or subscribe. That support is enough to continue to allow us to produce this show. Our interviews are with people who may have opinions different from yours or mine. So while we keep an open mind, just remember, it's not what you think. Welcome to It's Not What You Think. I usually do the introduction after this. So even though you and I might refer to things that are in the introduction, which I haven't done yet, but I will do it, about how great you are. Yeah. So how was your week? How was your year and a half? What's going on? Are you surviving?
Well, I am surviving. I was closed for 15, 16 months, and then we reopened for in-person classes on the 15th of June when the state opened. And so, it's been building slowly but surely. I still don't have a full schedule going. It's still a modified schedule. But for instance, I had 12 students in class today. So that's really good. Wonderful. So everybody is beginning to come back.
And I hear there's a demand for more classes on the schedule, but that's a whole other story. We don't have to get into that.
Yeah, that's another story. I'm not admitting anything on camera.
So I wanted to ask you about a quote. I ask all the easy questions first, by the way.
Okay.
I want to ask you about a quote I found on your website, just to also show that people actually read the stuff that you put there. It is desire, not ability, that is the most important criterion for the practice of yoga. So, like I said, I give you the easy stuff first. So, what about flexibility and strength, Kathleen? Isn't that important too?
No, not really. People feel that way. When people are stiff, they think that stiffness is either a good or a bad issue when they're doing something. If they're flexible, they think it's a good or a bad issue when they're doing something. But yoga, you just have to want to do it. It doesn't have anything to do with how well you're doing or how poorly you're doing, or whether you can, whether you do it easily or more difficult, have more difficulty. It really doesn't matter. It's just the desire to do so. And that's where that quote came from.
Right. No, that's a beautiful quote.
It's burning desire, which is called tapas in Sanskrit. And so that burning desire is what gets us where we're going in our practice with intent, desire with intent. And so.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful quote. And it reminds me, I used to have a teacher a long time ago who used to say in yoga, it's not how far you go, it's how you go.
Yeah. Exactly. It's the path.
and it's funny because I hear, and I'm sure you do too, there are certain things that teachers say, you don't know it at the time, but when you find yourself every, a couple of times a week, that goes, and it's like kind of like a mantra.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so,
it is.
Yeah.
And mantra is everything to me. I think all my life, I've picked up on a mantra here, a mantra there. And I just, depending on what's going on in my life, that mantra is what gets me through to the next point.
Beautiful.
And perhaps everybody's like that. I don't know.
Well, some of us use those mantras in a very positive way to grow, to evolve, to be happier. And others have, unfortunately, negative mantras. I don't like to use the word mantra there. We all have this radio station or video of the movie starring Morty Levine right up here.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes the mantras aren't so great.
Right.
So do you remember your first yoga class?
Yeah, I do. It wasn't a class, but yes, I do remember my first yoga class. It was through Palomar College. It was a regional opportunity class, and I I just happened in, and it was very difficult. Talk about stiff. I was one of those people. My joints were stiff. I was a house painter. And so, like this all the time. But anyway, that was my first yoga class. Now, prior to that, back in the early 70s, we used to go out and do what we called yoga, and it was our yoga at the time. We'd do it at this creek called Deep Creek in the area where I was living, or out in the desert, and we'd do yoga under the stars and, things like that. But those were not classes.
I'm gonna categorize that as yoga anyways, just on the
on the
permanent record of Kathleen Quinn. I'm gonna little check mark. So
she's been doing yoga since the early 70s.
Right. But how could that be if you were only born in 1968?
Yeah, right.
I remember, martial arts since I was 21 and still do it. But I took a little bit of a break from it, and I said, I'm going to do yoga. I was in Connecticut. And I remember going to a yoga class. I don't think I told you the story. It's a Bikram class. And I'm thinking to myself, how hard can this be?
Yeah.
I'm a karate guy. How hard can this be? Yeah. And I remember I'm in there, and we're into about 10 minutes. and I'm dying. I'm very unhappy with how things are going. Mm-hmm. Everyone around me is female.
Yeah.
And I'm horrible. And no, I'm horrible. I'm painful, discomfort. Everyone else seems to enjoy it and be very enthusiastic about it. And I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm supposed to make it through this class.
Right. And if it's Bikram, someone was saying to you, come on.
Oh, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards, I mean, now, of course, I know in retrospect, but at the time I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. But of course I made it back. I finished it and then made it back to the second and third class and all that. But,
well, and I should tell you that when I took that ROP class through Palomar College, I was in there with who I would call, I was like, I don't know, late 30s when I started back up, I guess. And I was in there with who I would call senior citizens. These women were, much older than me.
Right.
50.
Right.
They were much older than me.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, they were not having they were not having the difficulty that I was having. I was just, I was like you, I was just absolutely mortified that I couldn't do these things. And these women were holding their leg up and doing, anyway. Yeah. But I caught up with them. It took me months and months and months.
And now those people are in their 80s.
That's right. And they're probably still doing yoga.
I hope so.
I hope so too. I don't see them much anymore.
So do you have a meditation practice?
I would say, well, I suppose it depends on how you define meditation.
Right. My meditation, is defined as very broadly. Any activity when you're moving or sitting, you don't have to be sitting like this, where you're just observing, your breath or your thoughts or that kind of. You could be doing. Oh, I do a walking meditation. That counts. I do a meditation when whatever. So it's a very broad definition of meditation.
Good. And so,
including yoga. Yoga's meditation, as far as
including yoga. Yeah. So one of the limbs of yoga is meditation. But back to me, yes, I use my yoga practice as a meditation, but I mentioned to you just a few minutes ago that I have used mantra for many, many years that, to help to focus my mind, to help to empty, that old weird thinking and chitta vritti nirodha, right? To still the mind fluctuations. And so now I know that it is all yoga, but in those, coming up in this life, I just, I would latch on to something and boy, that works right now. That's what I need right now. And it always
Thank God we have that.
Came along.
Yeah. Thank goodness we have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank goodness that we have it. So, when I was, of course, I grew up Catholic. So, there was prayer and, growing up as a girl, a Catholic girl, everyone wanted to be the Mother Mary, right? We all wanted to be nuns. So, until we didn't. And then, but, in the church, there was always prayer. And that was probably one of the first mantras that I ever experienced. My father, if I was having difficulty sleeping, which I often did when I was a kid for whatever reason, my father taught me a particular prayer, and he said, just say this, just say it and say it, and eventually it will help and you'll go to sleep. And darned if it didn't. It worked really well. And so that may have been, my introduction to mantra right there. I just remember him,
Wow.
being with me and slowly teaching me the prayer every night. And, so.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It was a beautiful thing. And I know that prayer by heart to this day.
Right. It's part of, it's
me.
part of you. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, Buddhists and Hindus, I think, tend, especially newer ones, not guys like me and you. Uh, mantras, but the fact of the matter is every religion and faith has them. They just use a different word.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, I will ask you a little bit more about Catholicism later and how you integrate it. But before we do that, I have a very straight order here of things that I have to do, Kathleen. I can't jump ahead. Okay.
Good.
I'm on page 7 on section 4.
It's called sequencing, Morty.
Yeah, I can't be
You know how
confused.
I am with sequencing.
Right, exactly. Same thing.
Oops,
So
lost you.
who is who would you say is your main teacher or teachers now?
Well, right now, I honestly haven't been taking many classes. And so the classes that I have been taking have been either yoga therapy classes, which would be, senior teachers from across the nation, and from India.
Hmm.
I am currently taking a pranayama course with Stephanie Quirk in
Sure.
Australia.
Hmm.
And so, you know, um, but Carolyn Belko has always been my
Right.
teacher. Gloria Goldberg is my teacher. And that will never change. They'll always be my teachers.
It's interesting when I don't always ask that question on this podcast, not really always appropriate. But it's very appropriate with Eastern modalities because, you ask your typical American, yeah, we have teachers in 5th grade and high school and college, and that's where it
Yeah.
is. That's kind of where it ends. But here, you're 57 years old, and I'm still asking you, of course, asking you about your teacher. Even
Yeah.
as we get older, we still see, I don't have who's your economics teacher? Well, that was 40 years ago. Or
Yeah.
baseball, so our teachers in the West are from when we went to school growing up, but
Yeah.
In the East, our teachers are lifelong.
Yes.
You know,
And
you,
they may change. Absolutely. They may change. Now, that doesn't mean that if I'm not taking class from Gloria, she is not my teacher.
absolutely.
She will always be my teacher.
That's right. Right. So it's
Right.
kind of a nod or respect for the lineage is how I look at it as well, which
Exactly.
is very important, I think, in Eastern modalities.
In Sanskrit, they call that parampara.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Parampara.
Hmm.
And something that's always been of interest to me whenever I would go to, martial arts or yoga is I wanted something to have a lineage,
Hmm.
something authentic, something that's tried and true for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And there's yoga with lineage and yoga without lineage. So, just a brief background, I think, for our viewers that don't know, you're an Iyengar instructor. And Iyengar is
Right.
very different from other yogas. It focuses on precision, balance. There's a curriculum, founded, evolved by Mr. Iyengar and probably from his teachers.
Yes.
Um, and
Very traditional.
very
Very
traditional.
traditional. There's not a single new age thing about it.
Right,
Which is
right.
oftentimes the complaint that some people have is that,
We're going to get to that. We're gonna solve that problem today.
oh, okay, good.
So,
Solve the problem.
and the other aspect I think about the Iyengar teachers are you can't, like I could sign up this weekend and become a yoga teacher on the internet.
Oh, that's right. You
Yeah, I
could.
could do that. And Iyengar is just a little bit different than that in that, people train for years and years
Yeah.
and then are tested extensively before they're certified. And then they're
Yes.
certified at the very lowest level until, of course, you get certified, many, many years later for the next level and the next level.
Right.
So, and that's what's not here for a commercial for Iyengar, but what's beautiful about that is you go to Iyengar in Australia, where I've been, or Iyengar in other parts of the world,
Right.
and you get that same consistency,
Right.
and you get that same excellence.
Yeah.
So it's very unique in that regard. It's not just lip service. So we got into that. We're talking about teachers. So yeah, how did you meet Carolyn? Carolyn Belko, who's outstanding, beautiful teacher, beautiful poses, strong work ethic, very strict,
Right. Right.
very
Right.
funny. But
Right.
how did you meet her?
I was studying Ashtanga yoga, which is just another modality. Patabi Joyce's
Sure.
lineage that's his lineage.
Hmm.
And when I started doing yoga, I would travel. The first thing I would do is try and find a yoga class. And it made a big difference to me, is that I could go to yoga no matter where I traveled, whether I was going to see family in Tennessee or whatever, business, whatever it was. And so, and it was kind of unusual to me that it was easier for me to find Iyengar yoga classes than it was to find Ashtanga yoga classes. And it has to have been kismet, because it's not easy to find an Iyengar yoga class.
Right.
So I took those, and it was funny then too, because at that time I would take a class and I'd think, well, this is so easy. I'm really getting away with stuff here, because I was used to taking Ashtanga yoga classes where you would just do these long and incredible sequences. Anyway, but no complaint. It was a good background for me. And so, but then I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could do this into my golden years. I mean, maybe this was a method, because I didn't know how long I'd be able to do jumpings with in Ashtanga yoga, but maybe, just maybe, I could do Iyengar yoga into my golden years. And wow, I was teaching Ashtanga yoga. Maybe I could help teach my friends that were my age how to do yoga into their golden years. And so when I came home at some point from some trip, when I had this revelation, I looked into classes. Well, Roger Cole was over in Del Mar, and there was a class down in La Mesa with Gloria Goldberg and Carolyn Belko. Well, I couldn't get to Del Mar. In those days, you just couldn't get from San Marcos to Del Mar at a time when there were classes. There's just no way traffic would allow you to.
I think I had to take an airplane. Take an airplane back
if
then,
you
right?
could. They never gave us jetpacks. I'm still disappointed about that. Anyway, and so I started going down to La Mesa, and I guess it was my first class down there was 2001, and I was funny. I was so proud of myself. I'd been doing Ashtanga yoga, and so I said to the teacher, who was Gloria, Carolyn was in India. And so I said, well, I've been doing Ashtanga yoga for this many years, and I really would like to study to be a teacher in Iyengar yoga. Well, I'm not going to do any English. I'm not going to call those poses out in English. It's all going to be in Sanskrit, and you'll have to pay attention. This was Gloria, and I went, oh my gosh. Well, so in 2003, I started in 2002 with her. And it was funny. I never, in 2002, I said 2001, it was 2002 that I started down there. And Carolyn was in India. And then in 2003, I started the teacher training course with them.
Wow.
It was a 4-year teacher training course. And when we started the course, Carolyn came back from India. And that's when I met her. We were on retreat in Lake Arrowhead, and that was when I first met her. So then I get 2 years hence. Now I'm into the teacher training program, and I say and Carolyn's going to open a yoga center in North County, toward the coast. In Encinitas is where she ended up going. And that was actually, we were about through with our teacher training, 4-year teacher training. And I said, well, would you mind mentoring me? if I can teach at your yoga center, would you mentor me? And she said, yes. And so I taught for Carolyn for the next 2 years so that I could get ready for my certification. So that certification is actually, in those days, it was a 6-year program.
Amazing.
And that's how I got to know Carolyn. She's, and Gloria. Anyway.
Yeah. So, oh, it's only 6 years, huh?
Yeah. And now it's been 20, and and I'm still thinking about my next certification.
Right. So I know you also studied with Mr. Iyengar.
Yes,
you made trips to
India.
Can you tell me about your experience of studying with him? What was he like as a person, as a teacher?
The first time I met him was in 2005. He had just written Light on Life, and he was doing his book tour here in the United States. And I was helping Gloria, who set up his Los Angeles tour,
right.
And I was helping her do that. And so I was able to be kind of behind the scenes and actually meet him, not just be at the reception. And so he was wonderful. I mean, he was so happy, and he and actually shorter than I thought. I'd only seen him in pictures, and his legs looked so long.
Right.
Not nothing to compare him to, but actually I was kind of looking him straight in the eye, and that was kind of weird. But anyway, so that was when I met him, and he was just delightful. And then that was about the time he started being semi-retired, and so I didn't study with him directly like so many before me.
Mm-hmm. Well, how would you describe his personality as far as what you saw? You mentioned that he was happy. I mean, here's a man who's
well, he was happy. He was happy, and but in class, now that's a different story. He would make some jokes or something like that, but he was not kidding in class. I can say that about him. Straight, very, he expected a lot of you. If you're here to work. And if you aren't doing the work, go do something else. But if you're here and you're doing the work, then all is well. I mean, there were always stories that he was so gruff and hit students and things like that. Well, he didn't. That was all over with, I guess, by the time I took any classes from him. And like I said, I didn't take classes directly from him. When I was in India, he was always doing his practice in the back of the room, and he would just shoot instructions to the teacher. Say, tell them to do this, or tell them to lengthen their inner big toe, or lengthen through their pinky fingernail, or something. Some Iyengarism that we really needed to help us with the pose.
Well, I see a similarity there in a great master in the karate world who's now in his 90s and probably one of the few living martial arts masters in the world, Mr. Oshima. And there's a similarity there is they want you to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is they want you to get it right because, of course, they care. The other part of it is they are the channel of the lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And they also know on some level that when they're gone, so they have to make sure that you get it right, because otherwise it will be lost.
Exactly. And that is, now I never heard him say that, but Carolyn says that, Gloria says that.
I see it with
Carolyn. All say that. If we don't do these poses are lost. And it's true.
Yeah. So, and I see that, Carolyn, I see that with you as well. I haven't had much experience with other Iyengar instructors, but yeah. And it's a very serious thing in that regard. It's not, it's good to be funny and playful and all that and entertaining before class, after class, a little bit during class. But at the end of the day, this is, I don't want to say this is serious business, but this is business, life or death, I would call it, because we're working on our state of mind. So we have to get it right.
Well, this is a discipline. If what you're trying to do, whether it's spiritually or physically, it's all a discipline if that's where you're going with it. Otherwise, it's fun and games, and then it's fun and games.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's a little bit of difference
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So I know that the vast majority of yoga studios in the United States, they teach the physical aspect of yoga. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Iyengar studios, and certainly yours, do that, of course. But he taught the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, one of the foundations of classical yoga philosophy of Hinduism.
Right.
And that's taught in many Iyengar studios as well. Can you share with us, some of your favorites, from some things from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali? Or is that an unfair question to ask?
It's an unfair question. No. Well, so I don't have the book memorized, but I'll tell you, it took me a while. I'd say 5 years before I actually understood what it was that I might be studying in the Yoga Sutras. I have always shied away from religious texts, and not because I don't believe in certain things, just because I don't know. I've always had an issue with influencers versus egalitarianism, if you get what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So, and so I've always been a little bit standoffish, and so when I realized that what I was reading, if I could throw out the words "my Lord," God, He, that what I was reading was how to educate, how to discipline, how to get to know myself, my consciousness, that this was truly consciousness work. And, that's an old expression from, the 60s, that consciousness raising that we were doing back then. Well, guess what? It's still going on.
Right.
And so, and when I realized that, then things not made sense to me, because it's a very difficult text to understand. I mean, you still have to parse it out. It's not straight. It's too straightforward, I should say. Mm-hmm. It's not, if you don't have a commentary with it, and then you just have to look at the different commentaries so that things make sense to you. I don't think that Mr. Iyengar would even say that he had all the answers in his commentary, and would say it in the commentary. So, you just have to read all of them and let it land on you, let it seep in or slosh around or whatever you want to mm-hmm. say, so that it can be part of your life, your philosophy.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just reading a book.
Right. And I think that it also needs to be digested and chewed on and wrestled with, and, until many, many, many years later, where it can, where just like we talked at the beginning of the show, where it becomes part of you. Absolutely.
You have to read it over and over again, because the next time you read it, something's going to jump out at you.
Right.
I didn't hear that last time,
right. Mm-hmm.
But, that even happens in yoga class. You'll be familiar with that. You're doing a pose and your teacher says something and you say, I wonder why she never said that before. Well,
yeah.
I never heard you say that before. Well, okay.
I have a different take.
It to you for 3 years, right?
I have a different take on it, which is my own. That's one extreme. Here's the other extreme. Is like, oh, do I have to do this one again? Oh, she said this 1,000 times, and the answer is yes.
Absolutely,
yeah.
You do.
Yeah, because the 1,001st time, 1,002nd time, something will change, a nuance, or something can even just click until you go, and the light goes
Yeah.
off. And then 5, 10 years
Exactly.
later, 3 years later, you're doing the same pose and a different light goes off. So yes, the
Well,
answer is
right.
yes, you need to hear it again.
So, doing Utthita Trikonasana, I've said this so often, and you've felt this. So sometimes when you do Utthita Trikonasana for the millionth time, it feels like you've never done it before. Wow, where was this? Where was I in this pose? Or
Is this
I
a new
must not
pose?
have been in this pose.
Is this a
Yeah,
new pose they're
that's
teaching
Utthita
today?
Trikonasana. So yeah.
Well, that's
That's how
also,
that's how the sutras are. That's anything that we study. That's how they are, and that's what I guess study means, is that you keep going back and back and back. So, that I read the sutras in class, and when we finish the book, I go back and start the book again and
sure.
read the book again, and I do that as much for me as I do for my students. But I think it's a good way to start class. So
Yeah, and I think the whole concept between doing, I don't like to use the word repetitions because we'll call it practicing things over again with consciousness. I'd rather use, or, is better than just saying repetitions, because the body changes, the mind changes from moment to moment. So what we get out of something today is going to be very different than tomorrow. And,
absolutely.
and if we want to, I don't like to use the word goal, but if that's our goal, is to become more enlightened, more involved, more evolved, more happy, or more liberated, more free, whatever, that's what it's going to take.
Right.
Flitting around from, oh, I did a yoga class today. Oh, I did this. Oh, I did that. I did this. It's just not, the mind is not going to open and be polished the same
Right.
way as
You're
when,
not you're not narodahaing your chitta.
exactly.
You're not stopping the fluctuations of the mind. You're
Right.
creating
Right.
vrittis.
Exactly. Exactly. But, some of us are under that illusion. Not you and I, other people.
Of course not.
I want to make
Of
that
course not. No
clear for
illusions.
people watching this. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely no illusions.
So how were you able to, and maybe it wasn't an issue by the time you were studying Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, how were you able to integrate that with how you were raised as a Catholic? Or even for that matter, when you first got into yoga, sometimes yoga is just physical postures, but other times there's a strong Hindu influence in the class. And did you have any kind of conflict there,
Yeah.
given your Catholicism?
No, not given my Catholicism.
Okay.
By the time I was doing any yoga, I was not a practicing Catholic any longer. And from the time that I was a young teenager, I started veering off. My parents were not heavily devout Catholics. And so, we didn't go to church every Sunday and things like after a time, as we all got older. When we were younger, we did. But anyway, I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers. So as we were growing up, we did go to church every Sunday. But then that kind of just, life got in the way. And so things kind of eased up. So by the time I was in my teens, as a kid going through puberty in the Catholic Church, there's not a whole lot to believe there.
Right.
Because they'll tell you one thing and that's not true because you're feeling all that stuff.
The priest, the male priest.
Well, yeah, you can't, or your catechism teacher, whoever it is, why this, blah, blah. It's not true. You're not having those feelings. So anyway, but I guess that happens in all religions.
Yeah. For sure.
I haven't got a problem with that.
For sure.
But then also, I just don't do the Hindu part of yoga. I take whatever philosophy is in there, and you call it Hinduism. I call it whatever it is I'm getting out of it.
Right.
So I just have not ever really been into religion.
Right.
I figure, well,
let's take the words and the labels out of it for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
You find the value of something, it helps you, it's healthy. I'm going to use that. I don't care what you call it. I don't care what you call the tool. You can call it whatever you want. It's good. I like it. Wow. I heard the rabbi say something. Wow, that's total sense. I'm gonna
Mhm.
take that with me, or the
Now, and that might sound like, that I would be one of those people that might flit around and look and look and look and look and look, but that's just not true. I'm
right.
relieved of the fact that I don't have to go to your church and I don't have to believe in your God. Um, uh, you can let the philosophy of life meld with other philosophies that you have studied or looked at, and they're all the same. I mean, just they speak it in different terms, and from your whatever perspective you were coming from. I mean, there was Yi Jing. I read the Yi Jing for years and years and years when I was a young adult, and it was just wonderful to read those terse. It's kind of aphorisms. It's kind of like the sutras, and then there were then I guess in the early 70s there was Be Here Now. Well, Ram Dass. Well, so that was wonderful, but they weren't working against each other. They were
Right.
working for each other. They were
Yeah.
all saying the same thing. So it's
Mhm.
not like I feel like I've been flitting around looking for a guru, or just, I guess, you're your own guru, right? At
Yeah.
some point.
Well, I think you've immersed yourself clearly in the world of yoga, and
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean we don't bump into other things and say, "Oh, that's interesting. There's
Yeah,
value
yeah,
there.
yeah,
I'll take that with me."
yeah,
What's one of the things that I enjoy about doing this podcast is I've interviewed, Hindu rabbis, Imam, Baha'i, Christians, a long list
yeah,
and at some point in the podcast, it becomes blatantly obvious that we're actually all the same.
yeah.
And that's actually one of the criteria of being on the podcast is someone's got to be open-minded and authentic. But then whatever religion they're from, after the first 15, 20 minutes kind of falls away. I could be talking to any, which is a beautiful thing. When I first started yoga and started, studying it intensively, I remember my understanding is, if we went back 100, 150 years ago, which is not a long time, yoga taught in India was mostly a one-on-one affair.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oh, there was a yoga master somewhere. Oh, this hurts, or my stomach, or whatever was painful, or could be mental health. And I would go to the yoga master, and he would make an assessment and prescribe poses for me.
Oh, oh, okay.
That was my understanding, and it
Hmm.
was only until we came west, probably Bikram, where now all of a sudden you've got leverage and you got 20, 30, 50, 100 people in the class and you got a microphone and blah, blah, blah. And now we have these classes of people, which could be good. It could be maybe not so good. So why do I raise that? Because I know in Iyengar, you not only have your yoga classes, but you also have therapeutic classes.
Hmm.
It's very unusual. And I've been to a few of them. They're outstanding. Um, but it's very unusual to offer that. And that to me is a throwback a little bit to 100, 200, 300 years ago or longer, where people would go to the master as a healer, really.
Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I really don't know what my thoughts are on that. I I have been taught, and I believe this, that yoga, no matter how you do it, is therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because it is such an internalized practice, and that's part of what we learn as Iyengar yoga teachers. Um, we can help people with things that happen with a lower back or with a shoulder or with a knee or something like that. And it's only because, and it would be completely, and it's completely different than going to your PT. It's not the same philosophy. They may look like the same actions, but it's a completely different philosophy. One is coming from the inside, one's being done from the outside. And so um, it's more an extension of what we do in class except that you can be more specific with someone. So I have never done privates. People have come to me and said, can I have a private? I really would like to learn this. And I'll bet in 10 years that I've had this yoga center, I've done 4 privates. Because that's not how you learn yoga. You learn yoga as a practice in a room with other people doing yoga. It's an energy practice. And so that's what we do. Now, when someone gets, if someone can't do something in the class, then yoga therapy, you can take that aside, teach them how they can do those same poses so that it doesn't bother whatever it is that's ailing them, but they can get as close to the classic pose without hurting themselves, and they can come back to class and do it in class. Mm-hmm. The idea is that I want to teach you this so you can come back to class, because class is where we do yoga.
Right. And whatever you can offer someone in a private, you can get that in the class.
Absolutely, you can.
So if you're serious about this and you really want to learn that pose or heal or whatever, then you need to come to class. And you're going to learn the same thing. And right. and I think that's the beauty or the expertise of a lot of the Iyengar instructors, is to be able to deal with that person's got it. We're doing we're doing triangle pose or whatever. That person's got knee, that person's got back, boom, 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 and you've got to be able to juggle and master that. And I've seen you do that. And
and so one of the problems that happens is that someone will say, there'll be a new student. They'll come and they'll say, yeah, my friend or somebody said, come to this class because you could help me with this. Or my doctor says, I've got these issues, go take a yoga class. And so then you say, oh, well, good. I mean, if that's how they get there, perfect. Right. I don't care how you get to class. Right. I'm glad they're there. And so, but oftentimes what happens is things start feeling a little better and they go away.
I'm good.
And then, I'm good. That's all I needed. See ya. And then it comes back, they haven't been doing any remedial work for whatever reason. And then they come back because it's returned, or a different, we chase stuff around our bodies all the time as we get older. And so, it's not just one class that you have to learn how to take care of your shoulders or just hips. It's, first my shoulder hurts, then my knee bothers me, and then sometimes that hip, and darn, this outer ankle, I can't figure out what's wrong with it. Well, it's all the same yoga. I don't know how to say that exactly.
Yeah, human beings are funny.
We are funny.
Maybe the word is funny, or is it funny or stupid? I'm trying to figure out which is the better word.
Funny.
So
it's the better word.
Yeah. So I don't know if we ever shared with you the very first time I took an Iyengar class. I was up in San Francisco with Elizabeth, going through a serious and a long teacher training in a different modality, and we said to ourselves, we're up there for a bunch of months to do that, every day. And we said, let's go try this other thing here. It's Iyengar. We heard of it. We didn't know. And we go there, and I just remember lying on the floor in blankets with my feet up the wall. And the kind of yoga we had been doing was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And I was in my 30s. And, and I remember looking at her, she's looking at me, and we're kind of like giggling a little bit, which is probably not a good thing to do in Iyengar class.
But how would you know?
We didn't know. And I remember
somebody slaps you back, right?
And I remember, leaving thinking like, okay, interesting, but it's not at the time. It's not for me. For me at the time, and I think for a lot of people, it's about getting sweaty, exhausting yourself, maybe even leaving feeling. People think they're high when they leave certain very intense classes. I don't think they're high. Yeah. I think they're spaced out, and I think there's a difference. I didn't know the difference at the time. Now it's clear to me there's a difference between clarity, increased energy, and being exhausted and spaced out.
But you also know that in that same class, you could, I mean, maybe it's changed now. Now in a class, for instance, if you go to Carolyn's class or my class, and it's particularly intense, and becomes the meditation that you're doing, then at the end of class, there's some bliss there.
So I was very immature at the time, admittedly. Mm-hmm. But even so, that mentality is pervasive, which is why a lot of people seek the hard, hot yoga, because I believe they're anxious, as we all are, confused, and that just beats the hell out of that. All I know is when I'm done with this class, I won't be having that feeling anymore.
Yeah.
Will they, and there's a lot of differences between that and Iyengar, or we'll call it authentic yoga, because with authentic yoga, yeah, maybe you're exhausted physically, maybe you're not, but we're interested in clarity, precision, raising our consciousness, our energy level. There's a meditation before class, a meditation after class. So it's more clarity seeking, more meditative, but that's not necessarily what the world wants.
No, not necessarily.
It's a cultured, I think it's and that kind of in some ways relates to, the average age of a lot of the Iyengar classes that I've been to in the United States is much older. Mm-hmm. And
women of a certain age.
Right. And I think that's a problem. I think it's a marketing
problem. One of my teachers said to me one time, she said, you know why there are more women in yoga classes than men? And he just said, because they're smarter than we are.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't use the word smarter. I would say more evolved, more sensitive.
Maybe.
They have a better understanding.
Smarter, but you get the idea.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
Yeah. But
you get into it and they think, oh my gosh, there's so much more here than.
But my understanding is that in India, they have kids classes and they're very different and are younger people and all that. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference in the way they teach to attract younger people in India for Iyengar versus the United States? I hate to kind of generalize like that, but that's what I feel.
Well, it's almost comparing apples to oranges, because if you're a child in India and your parent says to you, you're going to this yoga class and you're going to do this yoga class, then guess what you do? You go to that yoga class and you do that yoga class. And that's what you do. And the same with, if your doctor says you go to this yoga class and you do this yoga, you go there and you do that. There's a different attitude about authority in many Asian cultures than there is here. Somebody says to me, you go to that yoga class and you do that yoga, I might flip them off and go do whatever, go to the beach. But so there's that. But even here, to teach kids, you just have to keep them moving. You don't care how they do it. You don't care what they're doing. You just say, let's be frogs. You teach them how to do frog pose. And it has to be fun. And then if you can get children doing yoga at a young enough age, then when they're actually doing Bekasana, which is frog pose, as a young adult, now we're serious about it. They already know how to do it. Now we can find out what's actually happening in the pose. What is the meditation in this pose? What makes this pose so that it is effortless effort, which is where we're all trying to go with our yoga poses. Mm-hmm. I hope that answered your question. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Absolutely. I think that explains how they are more open, or how they have more younger people in their classes mm-hmm. than we do. So I think in that regard,
it's part of schooling. You do it.
So in that regard, I think we're at a disadvantage.
And here, we are at a disadvantage. Somebody says yoga in school, it goes to court first.
Yeah.
So, and then, we decide it's not a religion or whatever, or it is, depending on where you live in the country. And then you can either do it or not do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you connect the bridge from what you learn in yoga in the very deepest sense to daily life? For example, I first started martial arts. There wasn't any talking. You just went and you watched the teacher. He said, we're doing this technique, and you do it for a half hour to an hour. there was no talking. Maybe there was a Japanese command here and there, and that was it. And there were some classes there was no talking at all. You just jump. He was doing it. You just did it. And an hour and a half later, you were done. The concept being that at some point you're going to be imbued with whatever knowledge you get internally, and then eventually as you mature like a fine wine, and that will follow you when you go out into the real world. But they don't sit you down, and maybe yoga is the same thing, and say, okay, here's what we get out of karate, everyone. And here's what you should do when you go into work.
I mean, we don't do that in
Right,
beginner
exactly.
classes.
So
in beginner classes, you just,
do the
you
poses.
just go through a bunch of poses, just real quick, back and forth. You give instructions. Because most people can't feel their bodies to begin with, and so that is the education that they're getting, is even realizing that they can turn one leg out without turning their whole body. And so there isn't much talk. If they have a question, you can see it in their face. They don't have to ask you. And really, there's nothing to talk about in a beginner class.
Right.
It's just letting people move their bodies, because that's why they're there.
And see who comes back.
Yeah,
Right.
and see who comes back.
So what do you do for yourself when you're, in the middle of your day and you find yourself, oh, I'm annoyed, I'm angry, I'm irritated, something, and I was in the car and he did this, or that person spoke to me this way, or just some random thought comes into your mind and you find yourself, boom, going that direction. How do you take care of yourself? What technique or tools do you use in that kind of situation?
Well, that brings us kind of full circle back to mantra. I use mantra. If I get some kind of weird earwig from a TV commercial, I have mantras that I just will start saying, and all of a sudden that earwig is gone until it comes back half hour later or whatever like that. And you just keep, it's like flossing your teeth, I guess. It's mental floss is the expression.
Right. Just keep polishing.
Yeah. Just keep polishing.
Right. Yeah.
Because we're so susceptible.
Right. Well, I used to think that, at some point you're done polishing and then you're good. But it's only recently, last 5 or 10 years or so, I go, I think this is going to have to be going on the rest of my life.
Exactly.
I don't think
into your golden years,
right.
Marty.
It's not like all of a sudden everyone just stops irritating you.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Maybe it's not them.
Yeah, right. Exactly so.
So,
but so, it's just, it's mantra. And they work without fail. They honestly do. I mean, they have helped me through thick and thin, and through times when I, had lost faith in myself and faith, I mean, and all it is just putting a better thought in your mind. Just doing that, if you are mostly looking for the good in the world and the good in yourself, what do you think you're going to find? The good in the world and the good in yourself. And so that's what I have been teaching myself for the last 20 or 30 years to do, is to look for the good in you and the good in me and find that. Because otherwise I'm going to find, if I'm not looking for the good in you, I'll find everything I have to criticize you about. And I don't want to do that. Life's too short. Yeah.
Is there any mantra or phrase that comes to mind now that you want to share?
Well, I have two, and they're very similar.
Okay.
So for a long time, what I would say is, may I be the Buddha, may I reflect the Buddha, may I see the Buddha in everyone and everything and act from that place. And and it would just kind of float through my mind all the time. So today I'm the Buddha, today you're anyway. So you kind of get that. And then the other thing is that I say, may I be the mother God. May I reflect the mother God. May I see the mother God in everyone and everything and act from that place. And so, that brings that softness. The Buddha is the Buddha is the Buddha. But the mother God, I mean, we have to have softness and joy in this world. And just saying mother God out loud brings softness and joy to this world.
Yeah. Like you said, they're very similar, but they're different
Completely different feelings.
flavors. Exactly. And,
And
yeah,
I just, one or the other, whatever pops into my mind, but those are the two I use the most. And they're just there when I need them.
what they're gems. So I think what's happening there is two things. One is you mentioned, I'm replacing a potentially bad thought or negative orientation with something, not just positive, but something very, I don't like the word holy, something transcendent. But the other thing is you're actually breaking a habit, which I like too. What's the habit? The habit is for the mind to go in that direction. Stop. So we're breaking the habit, and then we're, like you said, we're replacing.
Yeah, it's practical and transcendental.
And the practice, the more we practice, the better off we get, and then it's easier the habit will fade. I don't know if it disappears, maybe one day, but the habit of
it can become more natural. Yeah. People have, my sisters and friends have called me Pollyanna in the past, but she was a pretty happy little girl. So
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't. I mean, that's you can call me names all day, and some people do. So I'll share with you.
You get what I'm saying?
Oh, totally. So I'll share with you.
So that's okay. Pollyanna was happy, so I don't mind being called Pollyanna.
Yeah, sure. I'll take it. No problem.
I don't do unhappy very well.
I'll share with you two that come to my mind that I like
a
lot. One is not happening now.
Oh, yeah. That's a good
Not
one.
happening now. Because I'm thinking about next week and next month, and if this happens, and then well, and it's like before you know, you're like 5-10 years from now, and you're, excuse me, not happening now. So that's one of them.
Yeah, good.
That sometimes some weeks I could be going through that one a lot.
Yeah.
and then there's another one from my teacher that is, the past is history, the future is mystery, the present moment is a gift.
Yes.
So
after all, they call it present.
Exactly. And then I say to myself, the present moment is a gift. Because if you're in the present moment, then you can't be thinking about the future and the fear of the future or the past, because you're in the present moment.
Right.
You're doing that pose, and you're breathing, and you're observing, and you're feeling this, that, or the other thing that you're paying attention. Then you're not doing the.
You're not thinking.
You're not thinking.
Right.
You're not thinking.
So that is Mr. Iyengar's premise across the board. Is he felt, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it says that or even the Sutras, it says that you shouldn't practice the asanas until you shouldn't practice pranayama until you have all the asanas. Well, it's really not practical if you're in a monastery. That's different. But if you're living daily life, you have to make this something that you can do in daily life. Well, that's what Mr. Iyengar did. And he said that we can practice meditation in our asana. That is how he taught us the rest of the limbs of yoga, is through asana. That you have to be ethical, which are the yamas and niyamas, and you will eventually learn how to meditate, concentrate, and then absorb, right? And that's what asanas teach us, and that has been his premise, which is why I love Iyengar yoga. It's because that's true. I can polish, as the word that you used, which is a wonderful word to use. Refined is another one, but I can refine my consciousness in my practice.
So I don't know if you know this, but Mr. Iyengar was scheduled to be on the podcast today with you. I use the same joke when I interviewed Bonnie, by the way.
Oh, good.
But unfortunately, he passed away, I think 7 or 8 years ago. So he
Yeah.
couldn't be here today. But if you were on the podcast and you can, ask him one question or share with him any thought or comment, what would it be?
Well, it occurred to me one year when I was in India, and he was sitting on his porch, and I went over and started just visiting with him, and I just didn't have the courage to ask, but at that time. But I guess I would tell him that I am pretty sure I know why he has come into my life, but I wonder why it is that I made it into his.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know that I'd even get an answer. He'd understand the question, but I think that we're supposed to be in each other's lives if we're in each other's lives. And so there was a reason that he got to meet me too. And I wonder what that might have been.
Beautiful. Well, I think that the corollary of that is I'm so lucky that I found you and you're in my life. So I appreciate that.
And vice versa, my friend.
Thank you. So I think on that happy note, I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a wonderful joy.
Yes.
Hopefully not too painful.
No, not painful at all. And I hope it won't be 2 years before I get to see you.
Oh no, for sure. I'm going to wait till my hair grows long before I come and see you. So.
That would be fun. That would really be fun.
Anyways, it's good to see you. Thank you
It's
so
so
much.
good to see you,
Stay
Morty.
safe.
Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you so much. All right, be well.
Bye. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed our talk with Kathleen Quinn. Please like, comment, share, or subscribe to the It's Not What You Think podcast. That really helps us continue to produce these episodes and invite other guests from around the world. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to hear any specific guests on the podcast, please share my email, mortylevine@gmail.com, or visit mortylevine.com. And remember, it's not what you think.